Greenlight Network presents Football Time.
Hey, and welcome to the Football Time Show. College football enters week 6. It's a interesting slate this week. I must say I'm a little light on picks, but we're going to get through it nonetheless. We got some winners for you. But our man Dynamite David is here to break down Week 6. Are you ready to get into some college football action for Week 6?
I'm ready to snap and clear and move into another week. We'll forget the past, let's say, and hopefully people have been fading me and taking some more of your picks here.
Well, I must say, when you're doing a show and making our pick public, there are two ways that are entertaining. There's the one way where you win all the time and everybody goes nuts, and then there's the one way where you lose all the time and everybody just sort of has a chuckle. When you're brooding in that middle, that's no fun. You just happen to be on the other end of that right now. Tough couple weeks here. Another tough week for you. Lost about $1,100 this week. That brings your balance down to $15,401.
You've got me doubled up.
You're 10,000 lighter in the pocket here. Hopefully some of those futures come into play, or we can build this back up. We're only halfway through the year, so you got another half to at least try to build it back up. We're going to do our best bets of the week and worst bets from last week. We got one that you had. You had a 3-team 6-point teaser at plus 180. You put $180 on that. That was your best bet of the week. And UNLV, Arizona, Oregon. Nice.
Safe teaser there.
UNLV was a little bit hairy for a little bit there, but nonetheless, you got it. Your worst bet. Well, it wasn't necessarily a bad bet because I believe they were up about 28-3, 28-6, something quite large. I also had them as well. Northern Illinois, minus 3.5, 360 on that one. Cost you. That was just a tough one to watch slowly melt away there.
Yeah. I thought maybe when it went to overtime, might get it, but no.
No, but I will say at least they lost outright and didn't just win by like the 2-point conversion. So there is that. Always look at the bright side. I had two probably best bets. I had that 2-leg money line parlay at Texas and Clemson, which won really, really easy. That was minus 124. Had 500 on that one. And then I had the Purdue plus 350 money line. I wanted to see what Minnesota looked like, when they finally stepped up in competition. And I think we saw a lot of that. A lot of those teams that sort of went on the road or finally played somebody that could sort of punch them back in the mouth. Struggled with it. Washington, we know, struggled with it, but a couple teams I thought passed the test as well. Worst bets, Wyoming plus the 3 versus San Jose State, but San Jose State appears to be good again. So, and then Houston versus Tulane. I should just be punished anytime I take Houston, and then feel confident as they're winning for 3/4 of the game, and then melt down and have poor end of game decisions. But I think that's just Dana Holgerson motto, poor end-of-game decisions and game management. But we'll get into Week 6 here. Like I said earlier, it's a really, really light slate for me. I did not like a lot of stuff. I didn't go all that aggressive on a lot of bets this week. I'm really light in the parlay department. As you know, I've been throwing out a ton of parlays. Won another one last week. I only have one moneyline underdog parlay, and I got a couple moneyline straight bets, but they're really, really long shots that I don't think have a very good chance. Just didn't love this slate. What did you make of this week's thing?
Yeah, there's a few that stood out to me that I really liked. I was a little nervous when I first initially went down the list. I was picking a lot of favorites. Scared me a little bit, but I think there's some teams here that are really going to dominate. There's some teams where I thought the spread could have been a little larger. So I'm going to try to take advantage of these touchdown spreads and field goal spreads and on some clear winners, I think.
All right, so let's kick it off in the ACC. North Carolina, Miami. Now, I highlighted this game because, North Carolina's played one conference game. They're 1-0. Miami has not played any conference games. You look at the division they're in. It's North Carolina, it's Miami, it's Virginia Tech, it's Georgia Tech, it's Duke. that is totally winnable. So as sort of poorly as both these teams have started, though, technically speaking, North Carolina's 4-1. It's that Mac Brown magic. Look terrible for 5 games, but be 4-1, and your only loss being Notre Dame. But both these teams sort of have a slate clear. Conference play starts.
Yep.
This is a big matchup because both of them, their next 3 or 4 games are very winnable games versus those very sort of average to poor teams in that side of the division. So this one, I think, really kicks it off. The winner of this probably has the leg up, unless you think somebody like a Duke is going to be able to sustain wins, which, I don't know. We've watched Virginia Tech.
Yep.
They've gotten murdered 2 weeks in a row. Georgia Tech is nothing. Virginia just lost to Duke. So this is really, really a big game for both teams here. How did you see this one?
Yeah, I saw this as a really important game, but also I didn't have a play here. I think it's going to be a close one. A lot of outcomes that could go here. Still kind of questioning Miami's loss, kind of what happened there at A&M, especially looking at A&M's offense the way they've been.
Yeah.
Like you said, these teams, if they can kind of forget those non-conference losses and really look ahead to the conference, it's definitely a lot of opportunity there still for both of them. I kind of lean Miami here, but if they can't put points on the board, it could run into some problems.
Yeah, this is interesting because I don't know how to feel by Miami. One, I assume Tyler will probably be back starting at quarterback. That was more let's start to play better here. We can put somebody else in type of threat, versus MTSU. And maybe that was just a sort of hangover game where, coming off the A&M loss where they probably played it, they felt like they should have won, and they just didn't play well. And then, some freaky things happened, some on their responsibility, but like we mentioned 2 weeks ago where it was at one point they had 6 touchdowns and 5 first downs, MTSU. So, sometimes it's a little weird there. Sometimes it's your own fault. But, we'll see if they can. Because I think if you told either of these teams they could win their division and be in that ACC championship game, that would be a successful season for both.
And if you need to get your offense going, there's not many teams better than North Carolina to be playing.
That's correct.
Help start the Irish's offense, that's for sure. So
definitely so. All right. We'll see how that one plays out because I think we'll probably nudge whoever wins that one up in the division over there and see if they can sort of continue their hot streak playing. I will say, if North Carolina can win this one, they got a far, far easier slate. Miami still has Clemson and Florida State on that side to play. I think North Carolina only had like NC State on that side left to play. So they're on the much. If they can beat Miami here, they have a pretty decent path. Bad defense nonetheless. Probably the team that'll torture you the most and then end up in the ACC championship game probably would be fitting to the way your season has gone so far.
Exactly.
Next up, Florida State, NC State. Both of them coming off loss.
Yeah.
Florida State got handled pretty good by Wake. NC State pretty much got handled pretty good by Clemson. Offense didn't really look alive. I thought the defense held them in there for a little bit, but just not enough really coming from either side of the ball for NC State. Florida State just didn't look great, couldn't find a way to score. That Wake defense probably played the best game I'd seen them play in 2 years in that game. But what do you make of this one? Because this is, I'd say, if Clemson slips up, this is probably who's going to sort of slide in there. Who do you think has a leg up in this one?
Yeah, I think you have to give the edge to NC State here just defensively. I think they had a tough matchup against a Clemson team that was really finally starting to find their offense. But we saw Florida State still kind of get exposed, albeit by a really good offense led by an amazing quarterback in Wake. We both kind of saw that one coming a little bit. But I think NC State's got a little bit more talent and a little bit more experience, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and them being the home team here, I think gives them a little bit of an edge.
Yeah, I think a part of me wanted to ride Florida State here because I thought NC State looked worse than Florida State, but I don't know. I couldn't really decide. I didn't want to take Florida State on the road. I think NC State's played a little bit tougher schedule so far than Florida State, so we'll see how that goes. I just had no play in this game because I honestly think both teams are completely similar and probably on as level a playing field as you can be on. And it's just sort of what randomly happens in this game that probably cost one of those teams the game. That's all we had in the ACC. I had no bets in the ACC this week. There might be a couple of these where I have no bets. Like I said, I'm pretty light, and most of it is weighted toward the Mountain West for some reason this week. So I'm light unless we're in the Mountain West. So no bets for me in the ACC. What do you got playing?
I'm going to ride with the Wolfpack. I think, like I said, I think their strength and talent defensively and them being the home team, they got their loss at Clemson. Florida State lost at home. Now they're going to have to go on the road. I like the Wolfpack. Cover the 3.5. I've got 154 on that.
All right. We'll move to the AAC. A lot of teams had their off week this week in the AAC. But Houston does go to Memphis. Memphis has gotten off to, I think, quietly a pretty good start that I don't think people have known. They're 4-1. Only losses that lost Mississippi State. Houston continues to sort of just be Houston here. This is probably really their last chance to sort of grasp onto this season, though. I think that sort of faded away last
Still just
week.
one conference loss.
They're still there, but losing at home to Tulane, it probably is not really how you want to kick things off in the AAC here. So can Houston sort of recover and go to Memphis and win? Or does Memphis continue to roll here? I will say Memphis is the 4 games they've won have not been against the strongest competition, but I don't think you could say Houston has played the strongest competition either.
No, I mean, looking at this, I don't see how there's anything you can see that you've seen from Houston this year that could give you any reason that they're going to go on and win any games right now. Let alone at Memphis. I didn't have a play on this one. I just kind of stay away from these. This is an ugly matchup, but I think as what to play for and still kind of having maybe a little bit of team unity behind them and the coach still probably in good standing. Memphis is looking a little better than Houston here. I don't know if Dana's got much longer at Houston.
I think probably depending on the buyout, but at Houston that doesn't matter all that much, especially since I believe they're one of the teams that is going to make the switch into the Big 12.
Yep,
so
correct. Maybe time to get a fresh coach before moving into the Big 12.
That's correct. So that is actually, I have Memphis minus the 3 because I have watched them. I actually taken them in a handful of games in parlays this year. They've been a really solid team. I just think they roll Houston's defense here and put this one away. We'll see with the sort of level jump that Memphis has after the first game of the season if they can handle that or they're sort of at a same level as Houston. But I think Memphis is a much better team, and I'm starting to feel that this is probably a Memphis-Cincinnati sort of AAC. We'll see what the Central Florida game goes tonight versus SMU as we're sort of recording this. So, that one got pushed off the Hurricane. So we'll see how that one turns out. But right now, from what I've seen in the AAC, I think Memphis and Cincinnati are sort of a step above everybody right now.
Yep.
All right, Big 12. Couple decent games in here. TCU, Kansas. I don't know if we had this one pegged as the one we were
game day
going to talk about, but nonetheless, Kansas, nice win and a nice win in a different sort of way versus Iowa State, which I think sort of shows you that this Kansas team isn't just sort of a flash freak. They've won big, scoring a lot of points, and then they got into Iowa State's sort of grind it out, muck it up type game, and they won that type of game too last week. So Kansas really, really, I think, is a solid team. And then TCU just murdered Oklahoma
Yeah.
over the week. We talked about it, about TCU having played a really, really light schedule. They hadn't really stepped up in competition. Their first step up in competition, they looked really, really good. And I think right now, if you were sort of handicapping the Big 12, I think you'd put TCU, Oklahoma State, probably at the top there, and then sort of a Baylor, Texas, maybe mixed there, and maybe toss Oklahoma in there. The Gabriel injury, I think, really, really hurts them.
Kansas?
And then I think I might put Kansas in there. Now, I don't, I think they can win games, and it's, how long can they sustain this? I don't know about their depth, but, I definitely think Kansas is sort of in that second to third tier of the Big 12 and can sort of take this, but it should be an interesting game with TCU after that big win, beating a bugaboo in Oklahoma like we also talked about. They had struggled versus Oklahoma and just put it on them. So how do you look at this TCU-Kansas game?
Yeah, that was a heck of a beatdown they gave Oklahoma. As impressive as TCU was, I was equally unimpressed by Oklahoma and just the complete lack of effort defensively. I know they lost their quarterback kind of early, and that kind of took them out of it.
They were already getting beat.
But they were already down by, I think, 30 at that point. There was no winning that game from the get-go. So impressed with TCU to just really just take what they wanted there, and they've really got the mentality. Their coach brought a really good mentality to this team. I think this team believes that they can win the Big 12. They've still got some talent there. I like this TCU team, and I think they're, like you said, I think they're going to be right there. Oklahoma State's really impressed me this year as well. So I think they could be in for a battle. We've got a lot of teams here that are going to be tough to play in this Big 12. Kansas State likes to come up and really make it ugly for some people. So, you could be looking at a two-loss team that wins the conference. The conference really only hope at the playoffs is to have someone run the table. I think they're kind of hanging that on Oklahoma State right now. But, I could easily see TCU kind of going through there and getting some wins. So, especially once they get some momentum going. And I think this next game against Kansas could be really a game for them to really flex their muscles.
Yeah. All right, and then the Red River Shootout, Texas, Oklahoma. This has lost a little luster with the way Oklahoma's played, and then mix in. I don't think Texas has played poorly. You got the Alabama loss, and the Texas Tech loss looks bad on their schedule, but they bounced back last week, got a nice win, won pretty easily versus a poor West Virginia team. How do you think this one's going to play out here? I wanted to be aggressive towards Texas, but I ended up sliding it into one of my parlays just because this rivalry's a little weird, and at the point of this, I assumed Dylan Gabriel was not going to be playing after the hit he took, but it hadn't been made official yet. It's been made official now, no Dylan Gabriel. And it probably pushes me a little bit more towards Texas here, but I still have some sort of pullback a little on this rivalry here with a number like 7.
Yeah, one team gets their quarterback back, one team loses theirs, and I just think Texas plays defense. Oklahoma, I haven't seen them play defense at all. So I think this is going to be a very one-sided matchup, and I think this spread is a little low in my opinion.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if yours.
And Texas, I don't think has won this matchup in 3 or 4 years now. So Texas is really hungry for a win, and
I think they covered it 3 or 4 years in a row, but I don't think they won it. This is definitely their best shot. Oklahoma certainly can't seem to. They seem to have lost that offense explosion that they had. Now some of that, Gabriel being out that second part of the game, I think they probably would have scored in the 30s, on TCU. But they struggled versus Kansas State scoring points, and, the defensive side of things rears its ugly head once again, which has been their problem, through the Lincoln Riley era, and now that Brent Venables is there. I think it's not coaching, it's the Jimmy and Joes. We know Brent Venables can coach defense, but if you don't have the players, you look like you looked versus Kansas State, you look like you looked versus TCU, which is sort of the same type team. A little bit more dynamic with TCU than Kansas State, but sort of a power running quarterback, That would be my other question in this. Texas isn't a power running quarterback. Now, they probably have the best back in the country, if not one of the best backs in the country. So they might just be able to hand it off and blitz them. But Ewers isn't necessarily a, grind out, plus coming off the shoulder injury. I don't know if they're going to start running him straight up the gut. But any of that, maybe Oklahoma is a little better versus a pro-style type offense than someone like a TCU or Kansas State, who's a little more, I don't want to say out-and-out option, but sort of an option, sort of pistol-type look that the other two run. Any sort of way Oklahoma maybe defends a little bit better in this?
I don't see it. I'm really big on Texas this week. I also just don't know how much Oklahoma's really, how much fight they're going to have in them in this. I know it's the rivalry game and they're going to get up for it, but they just got morally beaten down last week.
Yeah. All right. So no bets for me in the Big 12. I'm out on the Big 12. What you got on the Big 12?
I'm riding both the favorites that we just talked about. I love Texas minus the 7. I will honestly would have taken this up to 10, maybe even 13 here. I think Texas is going to win big, and I also like TCU minus the 7. I think we've been a little fooled by Kansas. Not a lot fooled. I think they've got some solid wins. Really, last week was a really good one, but I don't think they're quite as good as they're as people want them to be, or they're trying to make themselves out to be. And I think they're going to get a little welcomed and brought down to earth by TCU here. So I like both Texas and TCU to cover the touchdown spread.
They've already quadrupled their win total from the year. So I think they're all right no matter what.
Heavy unit plays for me on these. I've got $462 on Texas and $308 on TCU. So those are both a 3 and 2 unit play. So looking to make back some money here. Going to be a good week.
Living life in the Big 12. All right, let's move to the Big 10 and basically no matchups this week in the Big Ten. We're very
surprisingly, I think there's still 5 undefeated teams in the Big Ten, but not really any good matchups.
Yeah, theoretically, Ohio State, Michigan State, but anyone who's watched Michigan State play this year, I don't think anyone's all that worried about that one. The only one I sort of highlighted was Purdue, Maryland. Maryland continues to play really good football. Beat up on Michigan State last week. Purdue went in there on Minnesota. I don't know if Purdue plays home games. It always seems like every time I'm here, they seem to be on the road. They're on the road at Maryland again. So I'm assuming the back half of Purdue's schedule is playing at home. But nonetheless, Purdue, Maryland, what do you make of this one? Can Maryland continue to play here, or does Purdue sort of do what they did to Minnesota, slow them down, and then sort of find their way on offense?
Eye test when I first look at this, and eye test tells me Maryland is going to win this, especially being the home team here. But then I kind of look back, and I thought Purdue really stepped up last week and impressed me. Maybe a little bit of it was just Minnesota not being as good as we thought they were. Now that they had to go out of town, but this is really, I think it could go either way. I think Purdue, if they can get their passing game going, I'd look at the over here, but I think that number's a little too high.
It was high to the point where I was starting to look at the under.
Just absurd. I think it was in the 70s. There's going to be some points scored here for sure.
But Purdue controls pace more than people think. They have a good offense, but it's sort of slow tempo. And you saw that in the Minnesota game because they slowed that tempo down, and Minnesota was more than happy to play that slow tempo, and then they didn't score points.
Yeah, so for those reasons, I look at that game, and that kind of makes me hesitant. So, one side I like Maryland, the other side I like Purdue. So for me, I just had to cross this one off.
Yeah, I think the only thing I sort of looked at was a little bit Purdue money line. I thought there was a little value there, just because maybe they're better than Maryland, but it was just one I couldn't be real aggressive on, so I just sort of passed it. But it should be interesting to see if Maryland can keep this up, because I thought Maryland was going to be a really poor team, but they've managed to stay disciplined enough on defense, and the offense hasn't made mistakes, which is what they were littered with the last 2 years. Turnovers galore. They've controlled those. The defense has been better, and they've been able to win some games. Now, they haven't exactly played a murderer's row of competition here. You look at that win over Michigan State. Yes, a nice win, but Michigan State has been terrible this year. So,
Yeah.
I think this is another level. Probably not the level of Michigan, but I think it's a step up of what they've been playing. So we'll see if they can handle Purdue. I got a couple bets here. You don't have anything in the Big Ten. I'm going for the big showdown in New Jersey here. Rutgers versus Nebraska. Rutgers is getting 3 points at home. Rutgers will try hard. I'm not sure Nebraska will try hard. So if you're giving me 3 points on two teams whose talent I think is pretty much even, and one team I know will try hard, I'm going Rutgers plus the 3. Also in that game, Rutgers, Nebraska, I'm going under the 48.5. I don't foresee a lot of points being scored in this one. This one probably played in the 20s, maybe in the teens.
Yeah.
I think both teams are going to run the ball into the line of scrimmage and try to end this game quickly. So 48.5 seemed like a high number. So Rutgers plus the 3, 125. Rutgers, Nebraska under 48.5, 125 for me. All right, Conference USA. There wasn't a lot of big ones in this one. This one we probably had pegged as a big one, but Western Kentucky lost a little luster last week too. And their loss, UT San Antonio bounced back and looked really, really good versus MTSU, just handled them on the road. So I think UTSA has sort of found their form and probably, especially from what we've seen to UAB, they lost to Rice, the other week. I'm telling you, that Rice team, little tricky, that Rice team. But Western Kentucky goes to UT San Antonio.
Yeah.
Western Kentucky dangerous, but I'm curious if this is another runaway for UT San Antonio, and we just start getting a lot of runaway games with UT San Antonio here.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed. Western Kentucky, I had them big. One of my bigger parlays last week. They were kind of tied in there with that Northern Illinois disappointment.
Well, at least they weren't up by 30.
Yeah, but UTSA, I think, continues to play well and solid, and I think they play up to their competition, and I think this should be a good game, and I think they're going to run the ball a lot. I don't think it's going to go well for Western Kentucky here.
Yeah, I just, after that game and watching what UT San Antonio did on the road to MTSU, I know that was sort of a bad spot for MTSU. It just looked like they're now a class above. They had their, tough little stretch there, and they probably should have won some games they lost, probably should have lost a game or two they won.
Yeah.
So it probably came out all balanced in the end, but it just, I watched that game versus MTSU, and they were way, way more talented than MTSU. I don't know if they're way, way more talented than Western Kentucky, but I certainly think they're the better football team here. So I think they might cruise in this one. I think I ended up putting UT San Antonio in a parlay. I think I was just a little scared of that number, mostly on a backdoor, because Western Kentucky can score points. We've seen UT San Antonio get a little sloppy, and I was a little worried. It's 14, and then, UT San Antonio drives down, gets a cheap score, and we get backdoored in that one.
Yeah, I've got UTSA in a parlay here. I really like them, and, I regretted not taking them last week against MTSU. I liked them last week. The spread was a little juicy for me. They covered it fine.
Yeah.
I think they could cover it again this week, but I've got them in a moneyline parlay with another team I think is going to win that I've got a couple units on. So I do like UTSA here.
Yeah. I'm going with one thing in Conference USA, and it's this game. The total on this one's 72.5. Western Kentucky, UT San Antonio. I know Western Kentucky can score, but UT San Antonio's defense is pretty good at sort of slowing teams down. And yes, they do score, but they usually score off their sort of option run game quarterback.
They run a lot.
Asking this game to basically be played in the 40, high 30s, I think this one is more mid-30s and maybe 20s for Western Kentucky. So I think this number is a little high. Anything over 70, I start to look and start to feel for under. So I thought 72.5, probably a little high. So I got 125 Western Kentucky, UT San Antonio under. I might wait on this one too on Saturday and see if this one juiced up, because I think people just ride this over, looking at Western Kentucky and UT San Antonio. But, that's a tough game to play because if it drops under that 70, then I probably get a little nervous. But if it goes up to maybe like a 73 and a half, I think you're getting even better value there. So I like the under in that one. All right, we're going to do an independent because there are two independent teams playing each other, and it's probably the biggest game of the week. I think maybe USC, Washington State. I was trying to Alabama, Texas A&M probably was at the beginning of the year, but once again, anyone who's watched A&M play probably not all that high on this one. So BYU goes to Notre Dame. 2 weeks ago, Notre Dame's probably an underdog in this one.
Yeah. One
good game versus North Carolina. They're now a 3.5 point favorite. How do you see this one playing out? I thought Notre Dame sort of found itself 2 weeks ago in the game, and then North Carolina game, they continued that and won pretty big. But I think BYU is a better team here. And I do wonder, as they sort of, everybody scores on North Carolina.
Yeah.
They struggled scoring on Cal. I think BYU's defense will be able to sort of smash mouth Notre Dame here. And we'll get back to sort of Notre Dame struggling to score a couple turnovers. The question probably is, can BYU's offense score on Notre Dame here?
Yeah, I think they can. They really do move the ball pretty effortlessly. Their quarterback makes some really good plays, and I don't think this Notre Dame defense is going to be able to force too many mistakes here. So I think they're going to have to outscore BYU, and I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. The obvious statement, they're going to have to score more points to win the game. But I really think this is going to kind of become. I don't think this will be complete dominance by BYU, but I just think that it's going to be easier for them to move the ball down the field, and Notre Dame may have some troubles. I like getting the points here. Yeah. I know it's on the road here, but BYU's, they've already had the big game against Oregon. They had a little bit of letdown, but they're fighting back now, and I think they're the better team.
Yeah, I don't worry too much like BYU going on the road. They're used to that. They've traveled into big places. They did struggle at Oregon, but honestly, if Oregon played Notre Dame, I'd have Oregon, as a pretty big favorite.
Yeah.
I thought that game got away from them a little bit, and it got a little, a couple freakish turnovers here and there.
Yeah.
Sort of made that score a little bit wider than it actually was. BYU, Oregon. BYU had just come off that tough game versus Baylor at night where they were pretty banged up, playing a back-to-back. They're a little bit more rested and ready to go here. And I think, everybody's back on the Notre Dame bandwagon, and I think you sort of have to split the difference here. I think Notre Dame is better than they were at the beginning of the year, but I don't know if they're better than this BYU team here. So getting 3.5 points, I liked that pretty good. I'm going with a BYU Notre Dame under 52. I think both these teams probably try to run the ball. I think this game will be tight into the fourth quarter, and then BYU might separate itself a little bit here.
Yeah, I've got BYU plus the 3.5. I've got a 1 unit play on it, $154. But I just think, like you said, that matchup against Oregon, I think they were kind of going toe to toe with them. They had a couple bad breaks. Yeah. Just made it too impossible.
If you watch it, the quarterback
they're still making good throws. They're moving the ball well. They just had some stuff not go their way, and it made it, insurmountable, and then Oregon just piled on. Yeah. So I think they're the better team here, and I love getting the points.
Yeah, definitely so. That should be a fun one on the day in Week 6. Mac, here we go.
Yeah.
Toledo, Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois is now 1-4. I think they have led in every game and have led by double digits in, I think, 3 of the 4 that they've lost.
So capable.
Yes, so clearly capable, but might want to fade them in the fourth quarter. Nonetheless, Toledo goes there. Probably the class of the MAC. Buffalo's probably in there. We think Kent, though. They definitely did not look like 11-point favorites in their game last week. We both were a little shocked it was that high. I think we're both a little upset that we probably didn't just take that plus 11 versus Ohio. But What do you make of this Northern Illinois team? Because, like I said, I know they were up double digits on Vandy. They ended up losing that one. Ball State, they were up, double digits on, lost that one. They might have been behind Tulsa, but I know they got in front of them and then let Tulsa come back down and win that one. So clearly there's enough there to win games versus competent teams, but for some reason they aren't closing games. So does Toledo go into Northern Illinois and put on a show, or does Northern Illinois finally sort of step up here? I don't know. They can start out 0-2 in the MAC and still challenge for it.
It's like I just said earlier. I think Northern Illinois is I think talent-wise, they're capable of being the best team in the MAC. I think you had picked them 1 or 2 in our preseason show, and they've been in all these games, and I think we could be due in for some real interesting standing and competition in the MAC this year. I think these top 4 teams could all end up dropping games, and we could have a real good show here, maybe come down to a tiebreaker. I think it did that 3 years ago, came down to a tiebreaker. So I definitely could see Northern Illinois pulling off the win, but I could also see them getting slaughtered. So
or being up 20
or being way up and getting cocky and think they have it and then not putting the game away. So I think it should be a good game. I think it's an important game for both of these teams. So expect anything. But Northern Illinois is getting points here. I think I've got it in a parlay. I like getting points here because I think either team could win.
Yeah, and Toledo hasn't looked great on the road. That would be the other thing. And once again, maybe you take Northern Illinois for 3 quarters and then Toledo in the 4th. Then granted, they probably are behind going into the 4th and make a comeback. So, who knows? Next one was Kent State, Miami, Ohio. We mentioned Kent State last week, came in 11-point favorites. Tough game versus Ohio. They did get the win. Yeah. Miami, Ohio sort of had the reverse, went to Buffalo. Tough game there. Buffalo came out with the win. Kent State goes on the road. They're, again, pretty big favorites in this one. But I will admit, I do think Kent State's probably, if they aren't better than Toledo, right on their level, but I don't have a great feel on this Miami of Ohio, and I'm stunned once again that Kent's almost like a touchdown favorite here on the road versus Miami of Ohio.
Yeah, this is very similar to the last game we just discussed. I think this is another couple teams that could be right there at the top in conversation. Miami of Ohio, they had that loss to Buffalo last week, but they've really stepped up. They've covered and won some outright earlier in the year that we liked them in, and I just think they're one of the few teams that actually plays a pretty good defense in the MAC. So I think that kind of separates them from the typical the run and shoot, run and gun kind of offenses.
Kent State would be.
So I think we're going to see kind of style matchup here, and if Miami can control the pace here, Miami Ohio, I think getting the points here may be favorable if they can slow this game down. If they can slow this game down. If this gets out of hand early, watch out.
Yeah, I think that's just, it's probably one of those that I end up passing on because I think Kent State's probably the better team here. But it just sort of, I look at it a little cross-eyed because I'm like, why is Kent State getting so much respect? They're going to play tight games like they did versus, I think, a pretty solid Ohio team. And now I think we all think pretty solid Miami of Ohio team. Maybe they can run away from a couple of those low-level ones. But it just seems like Kent State's getting a little couple too many points here. But I just haven't been sort of aggressive enough to want to take the other side of it, too, because, I know Kent State, if they get rolling, they can sort of put points on you pretty quick, and I just haven't been real aggressive. I got 2 plays here in the MAC. Nothing for you in the MAC. I got Buffalo minus the 2 versus Bowling Green. I think Buffalo's sort of starting to find their rhythm. Good win. We mentioned it versus Miami of Ohio. It's always a little tricky going on the road in the MAC, but, I think they're just better than Bowling Green. So I look for them. They didn't seem to have a problem going to Eastern Michigan and putting points on the board. So I don't look for them to really struggle going to Bowling Green and winning this game by a field goal. And then Ball State was plus 240 on the money line. Central Michigan has not been a good football program all season long. Ball State actually has more wins than they do, and technically, probably if you've watched the 2 teams play football, Ball State's probably played better football. So you're giving me 240 in a game I think is pretty randomly a toss-up, and, one team's just going to be humming on offense and score a couple more points, I'll take the 240 on that. So I think there's good value in the 240 on that.
Coming off a good win against Northern Illinois. So.
That's what I mean. The Western Michigan game where they were leading the whole game and just lost it right there in the last minutes of the fourth quarter. So, if this was under 2-1, I wouldn't, but you're giving me 2.5-1 almost in a game where I think
they maybe could be favored.
Yeah, I like why is Central Michigan so good? They've been crushed every game pretty much this season. So 240 money line play on Ball State, 125 on that one. All right, let's go to the Mountain West. Not a lot of great games in the Mountain West, but I do have a lot in
Yeah,
the
I've got
Mountain
a decent
West.
amount as well.
UNLV San Jose State.
Friday night.
Friday night.
Yeah.
In the lights. I don't know if we thought this would be a showdown for the Mountain West here.
Yeah.
But, now, granted, if you look at UNLV's schedule,
They got a lot more to come.
They're about to go through the gauntlet of the real Mountain West team, starting with this one.
Might get some large UNLV spreads again.
Yes. We are getting a decent one here. San Jose State, though, has played really, really good football for the last 3 or 4 weeks. They started off the first week looking sort of sloppy, but, the 3 or 4 weeks since then, they've looked really, really good. Really impressive going into Wyoming. And just putting on points like they did, which you just don't expect. And, granted, holding Wyoming to a low total you expect, but the way they put points on Wyoming and Wyoming, something not even like Air Force could go in there and do this year. So I was really, really impressed with that. But UNLV continues to sort of fly high, beat New Mexico this week. They didn't cover the spread, but 11-point win. And I mentioned, New Mexico's a little bit trickier than people think. They don't get the wins, but they aren't a lot of fun to play. So what do you make of this UNLV San Jose State matchup?
Yeah, I had to back away from this one. I've been on the UNLV train, I think, for 4 or 5 weeks straight. You got me on. You haven't been on the train with me.
I'm about to hop on it.
But, I don't know about this one. I don't know if they can do it. I think San Jose State's the better team. And I just think this may turn into a little bit of a shootout, and I don't know if UNLV is going to be consistent enough. May have a few bad turnovers or something, and just lag a little bit behind in the race. The 7 may be just enough to cover that spread, but I think things might start going downhill a little bit.
Yeah, I think they have one more game in them here, and that's basically what I'm looking at. I was going to wait on this, too, because I think people will look at San Jose State's results and start putting money on them, and you might be able to get that thing, off that 7 number, up in the 7.5, 8 number, where you can get a win, especially if UNLV can backdoor this, and you can get that, 7.5, and you can be in there. But the way San Jose State's played, they probably are the better team here. I don't know what home field advantage that's where it's hard to sort of quantify because, San Jose State doesn't really have a home field advantage, but it is sort of a tough road trip from UNLV to go all the way up into Northern California on a Friday night. So, it's just one of those tricky sort of things. But I like the number here, UNLV plus a 7. I will wait. Hopefully it comes off that number. I get a couple more points. 125 on that. I'm going to continue my New Mexico love. Plus 3.5 at home versus Wyoming. I'm grabbing New Mexico here. I think they can win outright in this one as well. I wouldn't tune in to this game. It might not be that entertaining to watch, but I think New Mexico can grunge this up. Wyoming's going to grunge it up, so it might not be pretty, but I think New Mexico plus the 3.5. I got 500 on that one. I didn't put this in here, but, it is traditionally a Mountain West showdown, but Fresno State's just had the injury bug, starting with their quarterback, but they've had tons of guys go down this year. They're just sort of a shadow of a team. They go to Boise State. Boise State minus 7.5. They seem to have found that running game.
Yeah.
in the second half of that game versus San Diego State, maybe they just figure out we don't pass the ball anymore. We just pound the run and we play defense and we can beat all these teams and sort of go San Diego State style and end up winning a lot of games. But Fresno State, a little light coming off that to UConn. Have to go back home, then come back to Boise. I like the 7.5 Boise State 250 on that one. Like I mentioned, Boise State just started running the ball. They didn't even throw in the second half. So 45.5 versus a Fresno State team, which I don't think will be able to score on Boise. I don't know how aggressive Boise is going to get on offense here. So I think this probably should be around the 40-point mark and not the 45.5-point mark. So under 45.5, Fresno State, Boise 125 on that. And then I'm going to throw a little pepper on the UNLV money line plus 215 versus San Jose State. Maybe it is a dream year for the Runnin' Rebs. So UNLV plus 215, 125 on that one.
Hopefully I didn't wear out the UNLV for you there, and you can get some. But, I've got some. This is another Friday night game, I believe.
I do find it interesting, though, that I've told you San Jose State has been good for like 4 weeks. I took them once, and then I've taken against them the next 3 weeks. So that's gambling.
But yeah, I like Nevada minus the 3.5 versus Colorado. I don't love this Nevada team. I've won some and lost some on them this year. But there's one thing I do know. They're a much better team than Colorado State. And Colorado State's having to go into Nevada here on a Friday night.
Not a great year for the Colorados.
And I think Nevada's going to be able to run the ball all night long and should be able to win this pretty handedly. I think the just minus 3.5 is pretty generous. I'm all over it. I've got $462. This is tied with Texas for one of my biggest plays of the week. Next up, I also have Boise State minus the 7.5 versus Fresno. This is just a terrible Fresno team. I think they've about quit on the year, and they're just going to ride it out. And Boise State's looking to kind of gather some momentum, and they're going to control this game from the start. And then I've got Air Force minus the 10. They, let me down a little bit last week. They didn't cover the spread against Navy, but I think they will cover the 10 against a very poor Utah State, albeit they are going into Utah State, but I still like Air Force big.
Yeah, Utah State coming off a big rivalry game, too, versus BYU, so they might have a bit of a letdown. They put a lot into that game trying to...
competed pretty well for a little bit.
So we'll go to the Big 12, Pac-12 here. Utah, UCLA coming off their big win, move back into the rankings here. I watched a lot of that UCLA game, and we talked about it, and it sort of played out just how I thought, where, Washington sort of struggled early. UCLA put on a big lead, and they needed all of it because Washington started just pouring in points in that fourth quarter. And, luckily they played 4 quarters and not 5, because if they had played 5, Washington would have run away with that thing. But UCLA had enough. I thought Chip Kelly coached a brilliant game there and was able to sort of grind that thing out and not give Washington the ball back, because if he had given Washington the ball back there in that fourth quarter, they would have come down, scored, tied that game up, and probably wouldn't have won it in overtime. So good win by UCLA. But they're about to have this is a 3 game hammer here where they play Washington, Utah, then go to at Oregon. So that's a tough stretch. I just think Utah's too good here. I think they'll put it on UCLA. I don't look for the home field to be that much, even in that game last week. There weren't a ton of fans in the stands. At least it'll be a Saturday night. I don't know why the hell you play a game Friday night in Los Angeles at 7 o'clock their time. Just seems like a bad idea. It'll at least be a Saturday game here, so maybe a little bit more of a boost, especially now that they're undefeated and ranked. But I just think this Utah team is just too good for UCLA here.
Yeah, I like Utah here as well. I don't have this in a straight, but I've got it in that 2-unit moneyline parlay that I really like with UTSA. But I think UCLA. I picked against them last week. That bit me in the butt. But I think like you said, I think UCLA coached their way to a win. I don't think they are actually better than Washington. They got the win, so I guess for argument's sake that they are better. But I think they play that one again. It maybe comes out a different way. But Utah, I think, is on another level than Washington, and they've already had the road test against Florida. They dropped that one. I don't think they're going to drop this one.
Yeah. All right. Let's move to the other one. This would also affect the crowd at UCLA because I think it's going to be sort of split here. Washington State goes to USC. Washington State played pretty tough this year. Probably should have pulled that Oregon game out. Didn't quite pull that Oregon game out. USC looked pretty solid last week. That tough game versus Oregon State. What do you make of this one? I think this one is a big one for USC. I don't think they're worthy of their number 6 ranking, but I will believe in them a lot more if they can hang the Oregon State win with this Washington State win.
Yeah, I don't think this USC team is going to run a clean slate. I think they're going to drop one. I think, it could be this one. I think this is a possibility. I don't know. They tend to do silly things and not put away teams that they need to put away. They rely on their scoring ability. They make a lot of mistakes. Kind of reminds me of a certain Big 12 team that a certain coach used to coach, where they just kind of fool around with people and end up losing games. And I think it's going to bite USC in the butt. I'm just kind of waiting on when. This may be worth a shot. Yeah,
that's certainly what I think. Now, the home field might carry them, traditionally, the northern teams coming south have tended to struggle. Probably depends a little bit what the weather's like. If it's, still hovering in the, 70, 80 degrees, Washington State might struggle a little bit late in that game. But nonetheless, I think this will be an interesting game because it's I think Washington State can go in here and shock them. They won't have any trouble, I think, on the road since they've been to Wisconsin. Wisconsin being poor, but still tough game. They've played Oregon. They're battle tested here, so they aren't going to be shocked by anything USC
competed
throws.
Well with Oregon too.
USC throws at them. So I got 2 bets on this game. Washington State plus the 13. I thought that was too big a spread. 250 on that one, and then plus 360 on the money line on this one. Washington State 125 for me on that one.
Yeah, I've got Washington State plus the 13 here. I took the spread. I didn't take the money line yet. I don't know if this is the one USC is going to drop, but I feel very comfortable with the plus 13.
It was more just a value plus 360. That's nice to have.
Yeah, so I've got a 1 unit, the $154 bet on the spread. I think they'll stay within that 13 for sure. Yeah.
All right, let's go to the SEC. I wouldn't say great matchups, but interesting matchups.
Yeah.
Tennessee LSU is the first one. Tennessee goes on the road to LSU. This is probably their biggest road game so far this season, probably depending on what you want to think about Pitt, but considering they just lost at home last week.
Georgia Tech.
I'm not quite sure that's the cauldron we thought it was, but this one I'm having a really, really hard time sort of figuring out because LSU is very weird. Tennessee is very weird. LSU can look like crap for 10 series in a row, and then Jalen Daniels gets going, starts flying around, and LSU looks gangbusters for 3 series, and then they go back to looking bad. Tennessee plays defense optionally, and they seem to be able to score, but, they hit those big plays versus Florida, but I think the other previous games we've seen where the quarterback's been a little bit inaccurate and hasn't hit those. And that's where I just don't. If he's off and he's not hitting those big plays, does LSU make enough big plays on offense to pull this game out, especially at home? Or does Tennessee just roll on LSU and LSU, defense can't hang on? LSU gets into sort of a shootout, and that probably doesn't play to their style. I don't know how to read this, especially after, you look at that Auburn game, LSU didn't play all that well, but you go back to that Mississippi State game where they pulled that one out, and they sort of did just what I said. They hung around. Daniels looked like crap for 3 quarters, and then that 4th quarter he makes 4 different drives where he looks like Superman, and it's basically like watching Arizona State the previous couple of years. But what do you make of this one? Because it's flummoxed me all week.
Yeah, both of these teams are going to want to make this game their style. I think Tennessee would welcome a shootout. I I just don't think LSU could keep up with a full game of that if it was back and forth. So I think Tennessee would feel pretty good even if LSU went down the first couple of possessions and scored. If Tennessee was able to answer, I think they would feel confident that they could pull away. LSU's going to want to really control the pace of this game and muddy up the water, as they say, and just make it ugly. I think the uglier this game is, the better it is. It favors LSU. And a close game, I think LSU wins. Part of that's just being a Tennessee fan the last 30 years, and this just feels like a classic Vols trap game. Once you start to believe, you go on the road and lose one that you're favored in. Small spread here. I was a little surprised. I thought the Vols would be getting a little bit more with as high ranked as they are, but I think people kind of see the same things we do, that Tennessee has yet to really prove it. I mean, I think the Florida win was good, but Richardson's starting to look good again. I mean, he kind of looked good against the Vols too. So Tennessee hasn't made many mistakes in these games yet. They had a couple against Pitt, and it almost cost them. But they really played clean games against Florida, and so I think that's going to be the difference. If LSU can force Tennessee to make some errors, give up some possessions, they may be able to pull this one off. But it's going to be a fun game to watch. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely so. Arkansas, Mississippi State. Arkansas, plucky versus Alabama, didn't quit, but I think that's just sort of their motto. Mississippi State, after the LSU game, has thrown up two really, really good games here. I lean Mississippi State because when Mississippi State is flying, I think they're the second best team out of the SEC West. But it's just hard to gauge this Arkansas team because I do respect their offense. So I didn't get a great read on this one. Where are you sitting on this one as well?
I like Mississippi State here. I think they're the better team. But then I look at games like that game against LSU that they managed to lose. They got home field, and that's solid, I guess. But the way this identity, they've really taken on the identity of their coach, and things get weird with Mississippi State. And Arkansas is a talented team, it was Bama last week. And I think we kind of forget that they were playing Bama and competed and about came back there for a little while, but then Bama put it away. So I think the spread's a little large here. I think Arkansas can probably put up points on this Mississippi State team. And Mississippi State last week, they needed a lot of turnovers and special team plays to really put that game away. So I think this is going to be a good one. Both of these teams fighting for position in the West. I think it'd be huge if Mississippi State could get this because this is going to put them right up there on Bama's tail in the West.
Yeah, definitely so. We'll see how this one plays out. I think if Mississippi State finds a rhythm, they probably can handle Arkansas. But if they're, struggling in the red zone, not getting touchdowns, kicking field goals or missing field goals, which they are apt to do, then I think Arkansas can hang around and we get that sort of fourth quarter game. But if Mississippi State finds a rhythm early, they tend to run away with it like they did last week. So we'll move to the next one. It's not quite as big a game.
This one was circled at the beginning of the year.
A&M, Alabama. The number's 24, so I'm assuming Young's going to play. I honestly don't know how much that matters. I probably wouldn't take the 24 if the freshman quarterback was playing. But nonetheless, can A&M sort of rise up here and give one effort, or they aren't just going to be able to score?
The only thing that gives me, any thought of taking the 24 here is just A&M's pretty good on defense. They have,
except for last week.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of special team plays and stuff that led to points for Mississippi State. So I don't think all those points you can put on their defense. And like you said, if they were going up against the freshmen, I definitely would take the 24. But I think Alabama's going to take care of business here. And Saban, everyone talked about it. He's got some frustrations to take out on Jimbo, and I think he just want to flex his muscles a little bit if he can, and he might have that chance. So Bama may just put it on him.
Yeah, that would be the only thing I would be a little scared.
I don't know. I think
with Young's injury, they might not want to do that. They might want to put this game away, then get him out. And
Saban's smart enough to not let petty rivalries like that ruin another championship run for him.
Care less.
Yeah,
if
honestly.
he wins by 1 or 40. So, that one's a tough one spread-wise because A&M has been basically so brutal all year long, and Alabama's Bama. I got a couple here. We're going to start off with the Auburn money line 20-1. This is mostly because Georgia's looked bad 2 weeks in a row. So if they continue to flirt with playing sloppy football, it will bite them. It almost bit them versus Mizzou. I don't expect it to bite them, but it's 2 weeks in a row where they played lazy and sloppy, and maybe they're just sort of cruising. And if you cruise in a football game, there's one where you,
especially in the SEC.
That's what I mean. You might drop one here, and so at 20-1. Who's it going to hurt to have that if Georgia continues to play sloppy football? Vanderbilt plus the 650 here versus Ole Miss. I watched a lot of that Ole Miss, Kentucky game. Kentucky should have won that game 5 different ways. I will say this is the best I've seen Ole Miss defense in, I don't know, basically since Hugh Freeze was bringing in players who underachieved, but at least they were solid defensively at times. So, but I know Vanderbilt can score points. They've scored points on pretty much everybody all year long, except for Alabama. I thought Kentucky outplayed Ole Miss that whole game. So 650, Ole Miss on the road. I'm willing to take a shot at that, and we're going the same thing here. South Carolina plus 310 versus Kentucky. I keep hearing about the best pro quarterback, on Kentucky, and all I ever see him do is make a lot of poor decisions, hold the ball, and turn it over. So, that's very similar to the one South Carolina has, who I heard a lot about, pro aspects, and all I see him do is hold the ball, get sacked a lot, and make turnovers. So I want to see him make some throws here because basically Kentucky's big win is Florida, and that was because the other team's quarterback threw 2 picks there and scored points, and they've sort of been sloppily okay. And sloppily okay pretty much sums up South Carolina and Kentucky. So 310 on that one. So I got 3 sort of long shot money line plays here. Auburn 20-1, Vanderbilt 6.5-1, South Carolina 310-1. Oh man.
Yeah, I just got one straight play here, and I see something different here in this Kentucky-South Carolina matchup. I think back to that South Carolina-Arkansas matchup, and South Carolina cannot stop the run, and I honestly think that's what Kentucky does best. Every time they got away from it against Ole Miss, they would turn the ball over or something bad would happen. But I think they're going to run, and just score all over South Carolina. I like Kentucky to try to get a big bounce back win here and cover the minus 10.5. I've got a 2-unit play on that, a little over $300.
All right, you got the more parlays, so you want to start us out here?
Your call, champ.
You start us out since you're the one loaded with the parlays this week.
All right, so I've got quite a bit of parlays here. We're going to start with a 6-point plus 6-point teaser at 160. I've got a 1-unit play on this. These were some teams I liked straight, but we just threw them in this parlay here. Tennessee plus the 3. Like I said, I think if it's a close game, LSU may win, but I like Tennessee plus the 3 here. They could win by a lot more than that. Louisville plus the 3 at Virginia. I like Louisville here. I think they're going to come out and beat a pretty poor Virginia team. And then Kansas State plus the 4 at Iowa State. This could be a really ugly defensive battle. Getting 4 here in a team that should win. I like Kansas State. So those 3 there, that's plus 160. I've got $154 on it. Next up, my 2-team money line parlay of teams that I like to win straight up. It's plus 122. I've got 2 units on that, $308 on Utah to win versus UCLA and UTSA to win versus Western Kentucky. Next up, into the parlays. These are all quarter unit parlays. I got $38.50 on all of them. I think I have 7 of them. I do believe. So we're gonna go through them really quickly. I've got
1 to break even, 2 to win some money.
Yeah. So let's get back in the green here this week. I think I've had 1 positive week all season, and I need another one.
It was a good positive week.
Yes. I need another one this week. So first off, I've got Arkansas plus the 9 versus Mississippi State. Tulane minus the 3 versus East Carolina, and Southern Miss plus the 6.5 plus versus Troy. This Southern Miss team I liked early in preseason, and I think they're going to get a good one here against Troy. Next up, these teams I all really like to win. These are heavy spreads. Florida minus the 11.5 at home versus Missouri. Wake Forest minus the 17 versus Army, and Oklahoma State minus the 9 versus Texas Tech. Moving on, I've got Louisville minus the 3.5, combined with Illinois minus the 3 and Tulsa minus the 6. Illinois, I think they may win this one big against Iowa. I think
if they can win this one, they're sort of a contender there in that side of the division.
Yeah, so I like those three there.
Nothing like Ohio State, Illinois for the Big Ten championship game.
So we've got next up, we've got a couple MAC plays. Plus a team getting a lot of points at home. I like Louisiana Monroe getting the 14 at home versus Coastal Carolina, who another team that plays defense optionally. They like to outscore and about messed around and lost last week. And then Northern Illinois plus the 5.5 versus Toledo, and Miami of Ohio plus the 6 versus Kent State. Then moving on, these are all big dogs, bad teams. Virginia Tech plus 14.5 versus Pitt. This Pitt team lost to Georgia Tech last week. Give me the other team getting over 2 touchdowns.
We're going with the Engineers.
Auburn plus the 30 versus Georgia. I think getting 30 here is a little much for any team in the SEC, except maybe outside of Vanderbilt. Maybe Auburn's worse than Vanderbilt, but I'm going to take the 30 points here. And then Arizona State plus the 14 versus Washington. Arizona State's been covering some spreads since they fired their coach, and I think they might be able to do that again here against Washington. Next up, I've got another one with Duke minus the 3 versus Georgia Tech. I think Duke's going to keep it rolling. I took them last week, and they were good to me, one of the few. Oregon State minus 7 versus Stanford, and Buffalo minus 2 versus Bowling Green. You had that one in your straight bets.
Yeah.
I like Buffalo there. And then my final parlay of the week. These are all pretty bad teams getting a lot of points. So I like South Florida plus the 27.5 versus Cincinnati. Bad South Florida team, but I think 27.5 is a little much. Northwestern plus the 10. I think,
They found their groove.
Well, I guess Wisconsin is just pretty much.
They didn't lose by 30.
I think the 10 here looks pretty solid, and maybe someone out there feeling frisky wants to take a look at that money line.
I definitely looked at it.
And then MTSU plus 9.5 versus UAB. I think 9.5 is a little much for UAB to beat anybody by.
Yeah, especially coming off the rice.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say debacle.
So that was a mouthful, but hoping to get back into some winning ways and make some money this week.
Yeah, I know. You have the long list of parlays this week. I got a pretty short list this week. Role reversal. We're going to start off with my 2-team underdog moneyline parlay, 22-1. The aforementioned Northwestern is in it, and the aforementioned Virginia Tech is in it. So, Northwestern Virginia Tech moneyline parlay, 22-1. Not that bad.
Engineers again.
The Engineers, the dumb Engineers. They played the smart Engineers last week. 3-team parlays. I got a couple of them. LSU plus the 3, Georgia Tech plus the 3, Purdue plus the 3 in that one. BYU plus the 3.5, East Carolina plus the 3, Utah minus the 4.5 in my other one. Northwestern plus the 10, Vanderbilt plus the 18, South Carolina plus the 10.5, and my last one, Florida minus the 11, Texas minus the 7, UT San Antonio minus 6.5.
We're on the same page on that.
Yes, we are. All right, so wrapped up. That's all the parlays.
That's all your parlays.
That's all of them. I know. It's a light week. Didn't even have that much going straight bet wise. Just one of those weeks where I didn't like anything. I hate to break it to you too. I didn't like a lot in the NFL, so it might be a light week in the NFL as well. Possibly lighter than the college football. We'll see what we can find in player props. So be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our shows. Our NFL betting show will be out on Friday, so you don't want to miss that. We had a good week in the NFL, finally into the positive, hit a lot of big stuff. Be sure to like and subscribe so you get all our content. That's our show, and we're out.
Greenlight Network presents Football Time.